Hey, Bob Rapp here. Today is Tuesday, October 21st. It's about 1:43 in the afternoon. I'm getting ready for a couple different conversations. I have been doing some work with the North Central Washington Tech Alliance, Dr. Sue Kane and Walter, their chair. I've been also working with a couple of the Native American communities around some broadband. Um, And of course, I've continued to do some mentorship with my students, college students. So I'm going to take a little bit longer than usual to talk about this process. I'm also presenting to AI tinkerers, which will be a subset of this talk. But for a while now, I've had this view of coding um, that basically says, you know, uh, vibe coding is fun to talk about, but tends to be sort of dangerous. So I put together something called AI Bob. By the way, that's for my friends at Stack Bob, Stack Tune, Ole and company. And the idea here is something that I've been talking with lots of different friends across the AI community about, which is an end-to-end agentic coaching platform that is designed to help novice developers figure out the trade-offs in development by having that senior mentor. So in my life, I've had folks that are better than me at many different topics in development or architecture. Some of my heroes I mention often. So Uli Homan, Scott Hanselman, Laura Butler, Todd Warren. I mean, if I think about all the amazing folks I've worked with, there's too many to count. Certainly Massimo, Mark Lambert. So as I think about all these people, they would be a person that I would go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think of this architecture? So the idea here is how do we get a complete set of interactive deliverables? And I've put these, by the way, a few different variations on GitHub. And so I did a PRD, FAQ, MRD, architecture and code base, visual design, GitHub infrastructure, and a visual dashboard. And the idea is that you've got all of these pieces and parts, but they're based on things that we know to be true around great software design, architecture end to end. So there's trade offs, of course. And what are we thinking about? Well, we're thinking about compliance, DORA, secure by design, GDPR, speed, accuracy, all of those things together. And so I used this structure, and I'm building this with Gamma, and I'm giving sort of the view of this. These files are available. We can talk more about them if you'd like. But how I started is I wrote an initial prompt, and by the way, I've kept all three of these prompts together. I call it the prompt 123 vibe rant Cloud Mary. And so I started with a prompt here, and I'm happy to send you this prompt if you'd like, that really talks about everything we know about great software development from the beginning of time. And how do we use that to coach folks to do better coding, particularly those that are vibe coders. So vibe coding is kind of started in the middle of the story. It's also potentially the case that you're a good coder, but it's been a while. So how do we understand how to do accurate coding best practices against all sorts of standards? So I've put in all of the references here, and the prompts came from Perplexity, they came from OpenAI, they came from Anthropic, they were perfected to some degree by other tools. And so I'm not going to read these to you here on the screen, but it's a 33-page prompt, and I went through three different variations of that prompt. And then that prompt drove us to first a Google design, and I'll start at the beginning here. I'm not sure you're hearing that audio overview, but you can see here's the mandate. to be a top 5% AI coaching agent. We went over to Claude. I was a little frustrated with Claude because it kept running out of tokens. Now I've got the $20 plan. It's difficult to keep up with what Anthropic thinks they're worth. They do wonderful work, but gosh, they're expensive. So here's the first command center I built. Again, this is just React Native, but it is a working prototype, which is what I was attempting to show here. And here's the kind of work that you would do as you're going through a coaching conversation. And it would say, here's some decisions you need to think about, right? So that's the first kind of view. I went into Chat PRD and I attempted to perfect the document a little bit. It was okay, it wasn't super useful. I then went over to Magic Patterns and I described my GitHub repository, which I am, by the way, making available to you publicly here. So here's all of the files, the architectures, the complete manifest. Probably worth pausing on the screen here. I like this because I think it's going to help make us gooder coders, right? So I then put over in GitHub my repositories. By the way, I put a bunch of different versions here. Not all of them are public. You see a few that are public, some that are public templates, some that are private. But you can just reach out to me at bobrapp@hotmail.com. I went to Lovable and I created a pretty good, it's a pretty good look and feel, I think. I didn't work hard to wire up all of the framing of this one because I actually spent that time actually in I'm going to show you a couple other views of this. Then I did go into Perplexity Pro and do one level down of perfecting of this prompt here, right? Downloaded the markdown. And you see that there's slightly a different view of development. And the idea would be you'd put in an active project, you would scan it, you do the metrics and the deep dive, and then we'd have some tools to say, was it a clean scan? Did you look at the contracts, look at the DORA metrics, right? So all of that, by the way, is in the code that I showed you. So we can go take a look there. By the way, thank you for the AI Tinkerers for inviting me to this conversation. I did find Gemini really, really useful. That's a whole nother conversation I will work on. And then finally, I created, which I often do, I created my favorite version of this. I'm going to go ahead and show this now. My favorite version of this came in the low-code tool that I find for a lot of people is a great dev tool if they really don't want to write code. So you can actually go to my site. I'm going to actually republish it here again. Where did I go? I republished it. I have a site now that is called, I think I actually secured the landing page here. Let me take a look here. No, doesn't show it there. We'll come back to that in just a second. And I did go into ChatGPT in GPT-5 and actually created an entire agent that does run with ChatGPT-5, and it's all deployable. I didn't put that in the GitHub repository because I hadn't tested it enough, but it certainly should work. I just don't know if it will work, and that's sort of the whole point of this, isn't it? So here's the demo. If you started a new coaching session here, let's go back to the dashboard. I think we're still redeploying. But I will share that out with folks here. Let's take a look at the publishing here. Yeah, if you go to aibob.net, that's I think the place we want to go. aibob.net. That will actually bring up the session. You can start looking at the UI here. So you would come in here, look at your first steps and all the things you would go through for coaching. You scan a repository, do an AI chat. This is hooked up to OpenAI Here's the projects you might add, do a knowledge base and setting. So I think it's a good starting point. It certainly should be a good conversation for tinkerers, and also it should show you kind of the process you can go through using these tools. So thanks, everybody.